table? Anybody leave this iPhone out on the table out there? Is there anybody who would like a new iPhone? It's what? Okay. What should we do? Okay. I am so grateful for you all. And no matter who you are, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, this is the teaching from the Gospel of Thomas that we're going to try to work through today. And I'm sure it's so self-evident that I don't need to comment on it. It's plain as can be. Right? When you are able to transform two into one, then you will become son of humanity. This is Jesus' favorite term for himself. It shows up in the gospel narratives that you're familiar with, the Son of Man. But this is the way that it's translated in Thomas. And it will be possible for you to say to a mountain, move, and the mountain will move. When you can make the two into one. So I thought I would have two ropes. And a way to make them into one, of course, is to tie them up. Right? And then there would be one. But that's silly. Right? You don't want to make two into one in that particular kind of way, because that becomes silly. There are other ways that you can do the same kind of thing, and that is that you can take two ropes and make into one rope like that. Right? There's not another Sunday school class in Houston.
Or anywhere else.
I have asked Edward and Pamela Harris if they would come and help me today, but I didn't tell you what we would be doing. But I did ask you, so you won't be. And Edward, would you stand over here? Pamela, would you stand over here? And you know to follow explicit instructions. Okay. So I want you to hold this rope in your hand, kind of like this. Hold it tight. That's great. And don't pull on it. And you do the same. You might want to back up just a little bit, because don't pull on the rope. Don't go any further. Can you back up to that? A little bit. All right. And you hold the rope around and hold it tight. Okay. This is a rope. I know, I'm not going to jump the rope. Now, this is more like an object lesson than anything else. We've been talking about dualism and non-duality. And the dualistic position about this rope is that I'm on this side of the rope and the rope is in front of me. You testify to that. There's people in the cheap seats back there where the Holy Spirit never makes it. So you would testify that the rope is in front of me and I'm behind the rope. Yes. So there are several ways that I can get on the other side of the rope. I could jump the rope. That ain't going to happen. I could ask you to move in, but I've already said don't move. So that is not going to happen. I could pick up the rope and go under it. But the other way that I could manage to be on this side of the rope is by being here. And now I'm in front of the rope and the rope is behind me. Is that clear? You testify to that? And I want to ask you if you would, don't let go of the rope. Don't let go of the rope. Because you never know what could or couldn't happen. But the rope is behind me. You testify to that. You testify to that. Now the rope is in front of me. Yeah, we're going to start a new religion now. So I have I think one of the best lessons today that I've ever written. And afterwards, everybody's going to want to know, how do you do the rope thing? I'm not going to tell you. So, when I first picked up the Gospel of Thomas when I was in seminary, I probably read 10 or 12 of the sayings in the Gospel of Thomas. And then I said, this is gibberish. I mean, you don't understand that, do you? I read to this. I think this is close to the end. I read a bunch of others. I had not, when I first got a copy of the Gospel of Thomas, I'd never met Thomas Keating or Jim Finley or Richard Rohr. I had really not had much of an encounter with Buddhism about non-duality. I read far enough in the Gospel of Thomas to find one passage that became my favorite. And I have referred to it in talks that I have done ever since. Talks to businesses or to psychologists or on spiritual retreats or various. I have used this particular saying, if you bring forth that which is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you fail to bring forth that which is within you, what you fail to bring forth will destroy you. At that time, I was very, and still am, into psychology, and I interpreted this particular saying to have to do with the unconscious, and that we have to wake up. We have to not allow what is in the unconscious to rule our lives. And those of you who used to attend Ordinary Life many years ago, I showed this particular drawing over and over and over to the point that one guy told me that if I showed him more, he's going to quit coming. Because it illustrates that this is the conscious part of who we are. Most of us is like an iceberg underneath the surface of the water, and the tippy top of the iceberg is what we would refer to as the ego. So most of who we are is in this unconscious part. After having some encounters with Richard Rohr, I came up with another drawing, and that is that we are whole, but there's only this conscious part. Underneath, right at the bottom of personal consciousness is the ego. Then there is our personal unconscious, which is that which contains the shadow aspect of ourselves. And then there is the collective unconscious, which is where the self is. So that when we are interpreting a dream, when we are interpreting some sacred text, we can interpret it on several levels. On the intrapersonal level, on the interpersonal level, and on the collective unconscious level. Now, my definition of the unconscious are really, really simple. The unconscious is not complicated to define. It is that we don't know what we don't know. The unconscious is not the shadow, which sometimes we keep as a secret from other people and ourselves. You can find out about your shadow if you find out what ticks you off, what irritates you the most. We don't know what we don't know yet. What we don't know makes huge and sometimes destructive decisions for us. If we don't have ways to access what is in the unconscious and honor it, it can destroy us. And I'm not talking about the kind of dramatic destruction that you can see sometimes, particularly in public figures that go off the track, although that obviously happens. I'm talking about the the minor addictions that we have, the things that cause us to live on the surface, cause us to live superficially, lives devoid of meaning. People who live at this level, they don't live at the heart level. They can talk to you about what's going on with the Astros, they can talk to you about the weather, they can talk to you about politics. But if you ask them, what do you think about what's going to happen when you die? They don't want to talk about that. Sometimes when we're at this superficial level, we're very careless in the way we talk in our relationships. We will say something, and then we will end what we're saying with, you know what I mean? And we don't. And other people will nod politely that they do, but they don't. And we don't know what we mean because we haven't taken time to be able to articulate that which is really on our mind, in our heart, in a way that comes across to other people. Know what I mean? Now, I still embrace the importance of doing the work necessary to access the unconscious. It is an important part of having a daily practice. Keep a dream journal. For example, that's one way to do it. There are many other ways. I'm going to elaborate at length on a meditation technique today before we're done. However, this teaching of Jesus does not support that. That is not what this teaching of Jesus is about. And I confess publicly that when I used this teaching that way, I misused it. This teaching is about having the courage to see life, ourselves, and others the way that God sees. And if we don't develop the capacity to do that, we end up squandering and destroying our lives. This is about accessing that inner light of our true identity and being able to walk a path that is illuminated by that light. We do this not for ourselves, and the Buddhists are really clear about this, but we do it because we do it in behalf of all who are, all others. We do it because this is the character of sacred mystery, from whom we came and to whom we return. So Jesus was this Jewish mystic, and seeing mystically means, among other life-changing things, learning to see in whole and not in parts. So when the Roman Empire co-opted the Jesus movement, there were two very tragic things that happened. One, God came to be defined in ways that caused people to believe that the God of Jesus was stingy, needing to be appeased, that this God was a God to be frightened of. And second, the whole enterprise came to be seen as very individualistic and future-oriented. How can I go to heaven when I die? Not about how do we learn to live in love and compassion, kindness and generosity right here, right now. So the early Christian movement embraced values like nonviolence, non-participation in war, inclusivity, tolerance for others, and even love of enemies. And these values clearly were easier to embrace when the movement had not been co-opted by empire, rationalization, and compromise. But when the movement that came to be called Christianity became the official and established religion of the Roman Empire, it started interpreting the teaching of Jesus from the standpoint of maintaining that power and as a tool for control rather than a path for personal and social transformation. So in case I have created the impression in anyone's mind that Jesus was interested in the unconscious, I wanted to correct that. I don't think he thought that way. Although I still believe we need to be aware of it and its power, but it's not what Jesus had in mind. So let's go back to this teaching. And I want to do two things. I want to try to attempt to understand what this teaching is about, and then see how it is applicable to our everyday lives. I want to start by saying the business about when you're able to transform the two into one. There are two ways that you and I or we can be in the world. We can either be in the world reactively or we can be in the world proactively. I have shared this teaching with you numerous times in the past. I think it is one of the first teachings that was transmitted to me by the guy I call my first official spiritual teacher back in the 60s. Now that's just a formal title I gave to him. I think my first spiritual teacher may have been a dog I had when I was 4. Because he introduced me to the terrifying reality of death. That's one of the favors that our pets do for us, is that they die before we do, and they let us know something about that. Maybe my teddy bear was a spiritual teacher. I'm certain my mother and father were. But there are two ways we can be in the world. We can be in the world either reactively or proactively. And as the years have passed since I first heard this teaching, and as I have hopefully grown in my own ability to see and to be, the truth of this teaching seems not only to be true, but it seems to be capable of being said in so many different ways, though the teaching stays the same. For example, Jesus said there were two paths to walk in the world. One is this broad, spacious path that paradoxically leads to bondage. And there is a narrow, straight path that paradoxically leads to liberation and freedom. There are two ways to be in the world. We can be either or people, or we can be both and people. We can include, we can exclude. And so it goes. I think it turns out that there are two kinds of religions in the world. One provides lifelong infantilism for people who want, for whatever reason, not to grow up. These are the people who want, for example, something to hold on to. Their religion gives them a sense of security and esteem and power and control. And their unwillingness to grow up is not a conscious decision. It's one they would not or could not acknowledge. There is no one in this group who, if I said, are you part of an infantilized religion, would say, yeah, that's me. But clearly, when you look around at many of the religious expressions in this world, that's true. Religions that seek to hurt people are infantilized religions. Now, by the way, I'm aware, being judgmental is a risk of doing this kind of evaluation. The other kind of religion is the kind that offers the freedom and exhilaration that comes from being willing to let go, give up control, and simply trust it. Just this week, I ran across a quote by Jürgen Moltmann. I'm surprised he's still alive. He's 93. And he was one of the theologians that was required reading when I was in seminary. He wrote a beautiful, very difficult to read book called The Theology of Hope. I'll put a link in the summary that goes out. He's 91, not 93. But this year he spoke to the General Council of the World Communion of Reformed Churches at the end of June. And he said, among other things, anyone who trusts the living God does not just see the world in terms of its reality. Realists do that, and they always arrive too late. Anyone who trusts the future sees the world according to its potential. Now that's Elia Delio talking. That's Teilhard de Chardin talking. The pull of the future what's out there, not back there. And this kind of seeing, the teaching we're looking at today, is encouraging. The person who follows this religious spiritual path can experience the absolute safety and security of being held. I was in the first worship service today, I was thinking the first line of the offertory and about how non-dual it is. The whole piece is, but just the first 2 lines. I sought the Lord, and afterward I knew. He moved my soul to seek him, seeking me. Okay, it's sexist, but you get the point. I sought the Lord, and afterward I knew. He moved my soul to seek him, seeking me. Now, I do believe that our religious teachings, like today, ought to provide solace, comfort, guidance, support for those inevitable times in our lives when things fall apart and when we have to go into those places that just scare the bejabbers out of us. However, the image of Jesus that is emerging from a contemporary biblical scholarship is radically different from the Jesus that was presented to me in the church of my youth, and what he taught about God and what he taught about the human community is also very dramatically different from what I was taught. The actual historical Jesus was revolutionary, mystic in every dimension. And he wanted the transformation of all conditions of this world. And it's clear, if you read it, that he didn't want himself to be worshipped. Rather, he wanted for all humanity to be empowered, regardless of their sex, race, or social status, by knowing together their essential identity, so that they together could create a new world order which he called the kingdom of God. The vision he had, in which he taught, threatened, and threatens every elite system or dogmatic hierarchy. I think his teachings are a threat. They're a menace to any kind of limiting dogma. I want to repeat some words from Albert Schweitzer, whom I quoted in here a few weeks ago. Albert Schweitzer is an important figure in a background of the kind of thing that you hear me talking about in here, because Schweitzer is the second human being, scholar, who led what is called the second quest for the historical Jesus. He was number 2. There was a scholar, a German biblical scholar before him, and then there has been the work done by those in the Jesus Seminar of our time. In 1952, he received the Nobel Peace Prize for his work. Albert Schweitzer was an amazingly gifted, talented man. He said, "What has been passing for Christianity during these last 19 centuries is merely a beginning, full of weakness and mistakes, and not a full-grown Christianity springing from the Spirit of Jesus." So let's return to the teaching, at least the first part of it. When you are able to transform 2 into 1, then you will become son of humanity. Now, unity and union are not only major themes in the Gospel of Thomas, but they are clearly implicit, if not explicit, in the teachings of Jesus. His very famous "I and the Father are one" is one indication of this. I and the Father are one, and so are you. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, because your neighbor is you. According to one of the historical Jesus scholars that I rely on, Jesus, to his immediate Aramaic-speaking followers, was known as Adiea. If that's how you say that, I have no idea. I'm not an Arabic scholar. But what that translates as is the single one. And this same scholar says this, being one, had made himself one, was, I'm quoting now, was undoubtedly the source of Jesus' legendary success during his own lifetime as a healer and an exorcist. Now again, this is not a psychological matter of self-realization. This unity is meant to embrace everyone. We live in a world with a few isolated pockets. I think there are some isolated pockets of exception to what I'm about to say. You would be one of them. But we're just a teeny drop in a big bucket of people who are interested in this kind of thing, and that bucket is getting bigger. So don't despair about how things seem out there. But the values that we hear about out there are exactly upside down from the values that Jesus taught. Jesus taught that the nature of the energy field that he knew and lived in, and that everybody did, though everybody didn't realize that, was love. And that this love, if and when recognized, could heal the world. Now, love is a hard path to walk, folks. That's why our world teaches, quite effectively, that the easiest way to unite a group is through hate. Hate can be a profound, stimulating emotion. The world and those who live upon this globe are much easier to understand and much less terrifying if everything is divided into the good guys and the bad guys. Right and wrong. Them and us, friends and enemies. So the first thing that happens when we have an experience that upsets the way we think things ought to be is that we choose a side, which is much easier than trying to hold together the tension of opposites. Now remember, we talked about the horizontal plane and the vertical plane. And that shows up symbolically in Christianity in a symbol called the cross. The tension of opposites. And the picture that is told about the crucifixion is a parable. It's a beautiful parable. The tension of opposites. Jesus is crucified with two people. One on his left and one on his right. One who is depicted as a good guy and one who is depicted as a bad guy. And he's holding on to both of them. The tension of opposites. He didn't choose a side. The second thing that happens is that we seek out facts that confirm what we want to believe. This is called confirmation bias. And the third thing we do is dehumanize the enemy. This happens all kinds of conflicts. So the true self that Thomas Merton talked about, that Jesus manifested and calls us to seek, the true self seeks for reasons to do good. The ego seems to seek for opportunities to be stupid. And the more unconscious we are, the more that seems to be the case. The writer, Annie Dillard, wrote, the mind, I would read there the self, the mind wants to know all the world and all eternity, even God. The mind's sidekick, I'd say ego, will settle for 2 eggs over easy. Spiritual practice is about getting the ego and its insistent cries of I need, I want, I must have, and I got to get rid of, this is unpleasant. We just call that craving and aversion. Spiritual practice is about getting the ego and its insistences out of the way so that everything can fall into place. Everything can fall together. And we don't accomplish this. It happens to us. The poet doesn't write the poem. What the poet does is provide the least resistance possible for the poetry to happen. What we want to do in order to allow things to fall into place is to assume that kind of stance, the stance that offers the least resistance possible to accessing and being accessed by sacred mystery. I got this from Jim Finley. He's a master teacher about spiritual practice. And he says that a contemplative practice is any act habitually entered into with your whole heart as a way of awakening, deepening, and sustaining a contemplative experience of the inherent holiness of the present moment. Now, I know that many of you get Richard Rohr's daily meditations, but in spite of that, or maybe whatever, I want to read one of the recent emails, because Finley has in that email a number of words about how to have a practice. It's a lengthy piece, but it's well worth repeating, I think, and having, so when you get the summary, you can cut and paste this out. This is Finley. Your practice might be some form of meditation, such as sitting motionless in silence, attentive and awake to the abyss-like nature of each breath. Your practice might be simple, heartfelt prayer, slowly reading the scriptures. Your practice might be gardening, baking bread, writing or reading poetry, drawing or painting, or perhaps running, or taking long, slow walks to no place in particular. Your practice may be to be alone, really alone, without any addictive props and divisions. Or your practice may be that of being with that person in whose presence you are called to a deeper place. The critical factor is not so much what the practice is in its externals as the extent to which the practice incarnates an utterly sincere stance of awakening and surrendering to the godly nature of the present moment. Quote, the following exercise is intended to demonstrate how meditation and the performance of daily tasks might gradually flow together in a habitual state of present moment attentiveness. Now you're going to hear this and you're going to say, this is not efficient. Well, wait a minute. It is efficient, but it's going to take a while. And that's why we put stuff off, is because it's not quick and easy. This is not meditation in 30 seconds. The exercise that he suggests consists of choosing some household chore that needs to be done. I will use as an example washing a sink full of dirty dishes. Begin by first sitting in meditation for 20 to 30 minutes. Then slowly stand and walk in a slow, mindful manner to the kitchen sink full of dirty dishes. Stand at the sink, mindfully gazing for a moment at the dishes. Slowly and mindfully put soap in the sink. Fill the sink with hot water. Attentive to the simple givenness of the sound of running water. Wash, rinse, and place each item in the drainer with mindfulness. When the dishes are finished, pull the plug, listen to and watch the water going down the drain. Rinse out the sink with mindfulness. Dry each item and put it in its proper place with natural, deliberate mindfulness. Wipe off the countertops with mindfulness. Then slowly walk back to your place of sitting meditation and sit for another 20 to 25 minutes. Then open a journal and begin writing spontaneously and sincerely about what it would be like to live this way. What would it be like to open and close doors? Take some boxes out of the garage, the papers, file them, answer the phone. Not as rude interruptions into a carefully sequestered off contemplative life, but to the contrary, as living embodiment of the hands-on divinity of daily living. I love that man. I think and I'm going to put a link to a longer piece in the summary by Finley on meditation. You can go to his website, contemplativeway.org, and he has free resources that you can download for practice. It's not evident when you listen to the din out there, but I just want to tell you the good news again. There are tens of millions of people who, some consider themselves religious and some don't, who believe that living in right relationship with what is requires us to be open to the truth and new light from whatever source it comes. And that the more we do that, the more we move in this direction together, the less our inherited religions are going to divide us. All right? So we have a practice so that we can grow in mindful consciousness. And if we are to grow in mindful consciousness, we have to know that there are different levels of awareness in different arenas of personal living. Relational intelligence, emotional intelligence, religious intelligence, all that sort of stuff. We have to have some way of being able to kind of evaluate where we are in our progress in dealing with peace, love, and joy. How's it showing up in the tangible relationships we have with ourselves, with each other, how we talk with each other? And we have to have a commitment to the kind of wholeness Jesus taught and modeled. When Paul says in Paul's writings, have the mind of Christ in you, what he is saying is, think of yourself as Jesus thought of himself. Have that kind of mind. We talked about this last week. I and the Father are one. Jesus thought of himself like that. When you are able to transform two into one, then you will become Son of Humanity. And it will be possible for you to say to a mountain, move, and it will move. I want you to focus on the second part. David LaChapelle is an artist and photographer, and some time ago I found a paragraph by him I just love. For thousands of years, sailors have used the stars to help establish their position upon the earth. We need a series of similar inner reference points to help guide us through the waves of change which are appearing on the ocean of our time. There's a name for such stars, which arises out of a scientific way of depicting the world. It is invariant constants. Invariant constants are those qualities, processes, and hidden organizing fields of life which endure through all changes. They are known as the truth. And the discovery of these invariant constants is the life task of any human being. And in the mystery of the universe, it appears that each one of us is afforded the opportunity to arrive at such constancy through our own particular journey. Stray too far from the truth, and the chaos of change will tear you apart. Place your trust in it, and you will find guidance, though the seas may grow rough around you. That is another way of saying, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you fail to bring forth what is within you, what you fail to bring forth will destroy you. Those invariant constants that he's talking about, they're known in spiritual wisdom traditions as the perennial tradition. Sometimes it's referred to as the wisdom tradition. It's a recurring theme in all the world's religions, all the world's philosophies. And however variously it is stated, it's the awareness that there is what I call sacred mystery that's underneath and inherent in the world of things. There is in the human being, however deeply buried, a natural capacity and a longing for this mystery. The Hebrew scripture says that we were created in the image of likeness, in the image and likeness of God. And I think the final goal of all that is to be in union with that mystery. So here's this Jesus guy, and he has this message. I want you to realize your wholeness. You are whole, but you have to fall into it. You have to allow things to fall into place. You know, it's so difficult to try to put this into words. But if that were to happen, it would be like moving a mountain. Now, in the Christian scriptures, in the Jewish tradition, in the Christian scriptures, in Buddhism, in Sufism, in Islam, in Native American religion, in any religion that I have any awareness of at all, moving mountains is a frequent theme. Now, I'm being extremely overly simplistic to say there's duality on one hand and non-duality on the other. That's overly simplistic. Growing from, building on knowledge and information and moving into wisdom and understanding is a very complex, complicated process. And for me, your mileage may vary, but for me, it's 2 steps forward and 3 back. Sometimes it's 3 forward and 2 back, 1 forward, 2 back. If you look at this teaching at the dualistic level, it is, as I said at the very beginning, it's gibberish. It makes no sense. If we look at it another way, maybe it makes a different kind of sense. There was a time in my life when I took this literally. I don't know about those of you who grew up in the church, but the only reason that I could not move a mountain was that I didn't have enough faith. I had an uncle one time tell me that if I went out and put salt on a bird's tail, I could catch it. You've heard that. Here's you trying to get rid of it. So bless my little heart, I got a salt shaker and went out in the yard, in the backyard, clung it in the seed, and every time I get close to a bird, I finally gave up. It was years before I finally figured out that the saying itself was an expression of the impossibility of catching a bird. I do not know what biblical literalists do with a saying like this. People say, I take the Bible literally, okay, move a mountain. Well, he didn't really mean it literally. It's a metaphor. Oh, really? What's it a metaphor for? My English teacher said I never metaphor I didn't like. What's it a metaphor for, if it is a metaphor? Mountain is a powerful symbol. Confine it to Judaism and to what became Christianity. There's Mount Sinai. Moses got the law on the mountain. The ark came to rest on a mountain. Jesus delivered his most well-known teachings on the mountain. This is a teaching of non-duality, and it is about the transformative power that comes to us and to the world when we get our egos out of the way and participate with unity of consciousness. You know, in most of Christian history, the emphasis has been on Jesus' divinity, which actually makes following him and loving him unrealistically out of reach. When it comes to Jesus, we on 2 totally different planes. Jesus is over there, we're over here. And I hope you understand that if God is split from us, alienated from us, then we're split. That makes sense? I read an interview this week with Diana Butler Bass. She's one of the leading voices in progressive Christianity. And the title of her article containing this interview is called A Hopeful Discontent. And the interviewer asked her this question. She said, "You seem hopeful for Christianity's future. Could you give a few examples of things that make you hopeful, that include the Christian faith, that indicate the Christian faith is headed to more love, more union?" And this was Bass's response. "The most hopeful thing right now is that so many people are angry with the church." One of the things I think you have to decide this for yourself, that it means to be a Christian, is to follow Jesus, to love Jesus, to work at having the mind of Christ, that is, thinking of ourselves and others as Jesus did. Many people who call themselves Christian believe in a supreme being who lives out there somewhere, and who had a son named Jesus, who died for our sins, in the greatest act of child abuse ever conceived. That scenario avoids living the message of Jesus. Namely, that the human and the divine coexist in him. He was human and divine. Now, you cannot get this intellectually. You fall into it. You can't really fall into something if you don't put yourself out there on the edge. If you stay safe, that's not going to happen. You've got to get in that risky position. Let me say it another way. The price we pay for dualism when it comes to this subject matter is that if we deny what Jesus held together in his being, then we can't put it together either. He's still over there. If we deny that, we can't allow it to happen in us. Having faith to move mountains is not about pulling off some David Copperfield-like trick where he made the Statue of Liberty disappear, which of course he didn't do. Or pulling a rope through your body, which of course never happened. You didn't see that. The point of the teaching is that you and I also are daughters and sons of God, and we're daughters and sons of the world at the same time. This is how Jesus saves us. Not by changing God's mind about us, but by changing our mind about ourselves. And changing our mind about each other. Changing our minds about God. Salvation is not some ecclesiastical magic trick that happens because we believe a certain formula. Salvation is a gradual, lifelong realization of who we are, always have been, and eternally will be. Carl Jung, and this is the reason that he is one of my invariant constants, Carl Jung came to Houston. That's why we have a Jung Center across the street, kind of. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You know, Jesus never asked people to believe anything. All he said was, "Come on, follow me." He was content to let people make up their own belief system out of their own experience with him. Buddha said, "Don't believe anything because I say it, or because you find it in a book, or in some sacred tradition, but believe it because it's true to your own experience." And I'm saying to you, you don't have to trust anything outside of yourself. If you do, it will lead either to arrogance or emptiness. God is love. God is not right belief. So, here's what I would like for you to take away from here today. I grew up in a religious tradition, evangelical Protestant Christianity, that was benignly fundamentalist, racist, sexist, all that wonderful stuff. And the religious tradition, evangelical tradition that I grew up in, emphasized the Great Commission. what we call the Great Commission. It's those words you find at the end of Matthew. Go ye therefore into all the world and baptize everybody in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good Lord, how much damage has been done in the world because of that? The Crusades, the Inquisition, the lack of respect and appreciation for another culture's history and for that culture's ability to express the sacred in their own language, their own symbols, their own tradition. Biblical scholarship now clearly says Jesus never said those words. They were a later addition by somebody, early, maybe 3rd, 4th century. But Jesus did give a great commission. He did do that. And you know it. He said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. If we take that love into the world as our Great Commission, not as a triumphal spread of Christianity, but as the humble spread of God's dream for justice and harmony here and now, it will move mountains. I promise you, you go out to live like this and it will shake things up. Paul Tillich referred to it as the shaking of the foundation. St. Augustine said, hope has two beautiful daughters. They are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to ensure that they don't stay that way. And they won't, if we allow things to fall together. Okay, no matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, remember this, you carry precious cargo, so watch your step, and I will see you here next week.
You want me to take that?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me when to stop.
Right there, you're all good. Thank you.